Will you join me in a prayer? God, may the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be delightful to you this morning. Amen. Thank you. So today we're talking about family, and I thought I would give you a few clues where my family of origin might be from. Sometimes you can tell where somebody's from by what they have on or by what they wear. Yeah, my family of origin is from Texas. And you'll be delighted to know today we're not doing work on our families of origin. Hallelujah! I do, however, want to introduce you to my family. Aren't we cute? Can you see me there at the top with my braid? Next to me is my son, Mac, and his fiancée, Katie. Now, Mac's name is McFarlane, and that's the name of our clan from Scotland. Some of you may have family from Scotland. Next to me is my daughter, Rebecca. Rebecca looks exactly like me, and everyone tells her that. Her boyfriend, Oliver, and did you see the fur babies? They're Malamutes. And the dark one is Kodiak, the brother, and the lighter one is Marshmallow, the sister. And that's my family. I happen to think they're pretty great. We've just adopted or rescued 2 more fur babies, and I will introduce them to you next time I'm here. Their names are Iggy and Scout. So Mac and Becca also have another family photo that includes their father. About 20 years ago, their father and I got a divorce, which is a really sad thing. But you know, sometimes sad things happen even in the greatest of families. Either way, I happen to think our family is pretty great. You know, Rachel was talking, and Wei lifted this up. Sometimes our families are people that we love. I call those families of choice. And Rachel and I come from a family like that. We worked together for several years in a family down in Danville at the Danville Congregational Church with another pastor named Alan, who some of you know, and a beautiful minister of music named Kristen. And we spent Easter and Christmas together, and we spent a lot of time making plans for that congregation. And because of that family, I get to be here today with Rachel's family in Berkeley because she invited me to come. Thank you for that. I'm so glad you're part of my extended family. So I am going to tell you a story today that comes from the Bible. And it comes from the very first book, Genesis, chapter 12 through 15 through 20 through, there's a lot of it. So rather than reading it to you, with your permission, I'm going to tell you the story. And this story involves 2 people named Sarai and Abram. And I am going to show you a picture of them. This is a picture of maybe what Abram and Sarai looked like. And I'm going to tell you the story of the baby in just a minute. This story takes place about 5,000 years ago, a really long time ago, before I was born. And it takes place in the desert. Now, the desert is a challenging and very unique place to live. You see, in the desert, there's very little water. So you have to be really careful with your water, just like we have been in our drought recently. And food doesn't grow in the desert, so you have to work really, really hard to grow your food. And the weather is, bizarre. It's really hot during the day, and the wind blows the sand, and it stings your skin, and it's very cold at night. So people that live in the desert work hard and are careful with their water, and they wear clothing that protects them in the day from the heat, and at the night keeps them warm. So in the desert, a long, long time ago, there was a city named Ur. And in the city of Ur lived Abram and Sarai. And Abram and Sarai were surrounded by people in the city of Ur that believed in many gods. There were gods in the rocks and in the plants and in the animals. They had a god for the sky and for the wind and for the rain. There were hundreds, maybe even millions of gods. But their family, Sarai and Abram, believed in one God that was in all those places. You see, their God was everywhere. And Abram at night would sometimes walk outside to the edge of the desert, and he would look up, and there were so many stars in the sky, and he would come so close to God, and God would come so close to him that Abram knew what God wanted him to do. And God was asking him to relocate his family from to another city named Haran. Now, Haran was just down the road a bit. So they went with their cattle and their sheep, and I think there were some donkeys. And they took their whole family with them, and they walked along the beautiful river Euphrates. You see, remember, in the desert, it's very important to be close to that source of water. And they walked along the Euphrates in the desert, and they came to the city of Haran. And Abram settled his family, and they set up their tents, and he walked out to the edge of the desert in Haran, and he looked up at the night sky, and he came so close to God, and God came so close to him. And Abram, maybe with one eye open, was like, "Are you sure?" He was trying to hear what God wanted him to do, but he wasn't so sure because God was asking him to walk west from Haran towards a land called Canaan, out in the middle of the desert. Now remember, the desert is a challenging place to live. So Abram and Sarah pack up their family, and they begin this journey west. Now there's not a river to lead them. So they head west out into the desert, where there's very little water and very little food, and it's very hot and very cold. And Abram came to a place, and they set up their tents for the night, and he walked up this hill, and he knelt down, and he prayed, and he felt God in his heart, and he realized God was even in that place. And he named that place Shechem. And he built an altar of stones to mark that place. And they broke camp, and they walked another day, and they set up their camp, and Abram walked to the top of that hill, and he knelt down, and he felt God's presence all around him. And he named that place Bethel. And they continued west as God had directed them, and they come to a place where there's water. And there are beautiful oak trees, the oak trees of Mamre, we are told. And he's near the town of Hebron. And Abram and Sarai settle in that town. And Abram goes to the edge of the desert, and he looks up at the stars in the sky, and he feels in his heart that God is talking to him. And this is what he thought. He heard God say, God said, Abram, you will have many children. You will have so many children, they will be as many as the grains of sand in the desert and the stars in the night sky. And Abram went back to tell Sarah what God had told him or revealed to him in his heart. And Abraham and Sarah changed their names to mark that important event. And then out of the desert came 3 strangers. Now, I think maybe they were angels or messengers of God. And they sat and they had dinner with Abraham and Sarah. And this is what they said. They said, Abraham and Sarah, you are going to be the father and the mother of a great nation. And you are going to have so many children, they will be like the grains of sand in the desert and the stars in the night sky. And Abraham and Sarah just laughed because they were old like me. And they said, we're too old to have children. And the strangers just smiled. And after the strangers left, lo and behold, Sarah became with child. And Abraham and Sarah had a baby, and they named him Isaac or Ishak, which in Hebrew means filled with laughter. Isn't that a great name? And Isaac grew up, and Sarah grew old, and she died. And that's a very sad thing. And Isaac and Abraham buried her beneath the oaks of Mamre. And Abraham was very lonely in his heart, but he knew he had one more thing to do, and that was to find a wife for Isaac from the city where he came from, his ancestral city of Ur. So Abraham sent a helper, and the helper walked all the way past those stone altars at Shechem and Bethel and back to Haran and along the Euphrates to the city of Ur. And he was really hot and really tired. And he sat down at a well. And along came a woman. And she drew water from the well and shared it with Abraham's helper. And he looked at her and realized that she was not only beautiful on the outside, but she was very beautiful on the inside. And her name was Rebecca, which I love. And she sat and she listened to Abraham's helper, and he told her all about the wonderful family that he came from. And Rebecca decided she wanted to become a part of that great family. So she left the city of Ur and went with Abraham's helper along the river Euphrates to Haran, and up to the altar at Shechem, and they prayed, and up to the altar at Bethel, and they prayed. And as they were walking towards Hebron, Isaac saw them, and he was so excited, he ran out to meet them, and he fell in love with Rebekah. And now I'm going to introduce you to another family. Rebekah and Isaac got married. And do you know what happened? They not only had children, but they had twins. And then the twins had children, and their children had children, and their children had children, until your grandparents were born, and your mothers, and your fathers, and now you. And you, my friends, are a part of this great family that are as many as the grains of sand in the desert and the stars in the night sky. That's a lot of grains of sand, isn't it? Now, I wonder, do any of you have a part of the story that was your absolute favorite? Mine was when they named their daughter, when Isaac's wife was named Rebecca. That's my favorite part. Did you have a favorite part? Anyone? Yeah. When they laughed. Anybody else have a favorite part to this story? The well. Abraham's helper got his thirst quenched at the well. When Abraham asked God, wait, are you sure? Really? This is what you want me to do? Go to seminary and become a pastor? Seriously? Yes? Yes, Rebekah and Abraham's helper stopped and prayed at the same altars, right, at Shechem and Bethel. I wonder if there might not be a part of the story that is about you. Where are you in that story? Two things that I want to lift up that I think were really important in that story that helped this family become a really great family was the laughter, but also the fact that they prayed and they lifted their eyes to the night sky in awe and wonder, and they listened. Thanks be to God. Amen.